Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Guiding Light, where we help you follow the peace. I'm Jenna Carson,
I'm Sierra Larson.
and today we are so privileged to have our special guest join us, the one, the only Reverend Roxanne Birchfield, aka Rev Roxy. Welcome, Rev Roxy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, guys.
Reverend Roxy is the dynamic founder of Married by Rev Roxy, a premier wedding officiant brand known for curating personalized and high-profile ceremonies that blend faith, love, and modern flair. As a military chaplain, licensed therapist, and reality TV wedding officiant, Love is Blind, Married at First Sight, Love and Hip Hop, Rev Roxy brings a one-of-a-kind voice to the wedding industry. Her work has been featured in Vogue, Forbes, and the New York Times, reflecting her reputation as a thought leader in both ministry and modern marriage culture. Whether she's officiating celebrity weddings or counseling couples through premarital prep, Rev Roxy infuses every moment with authenticity, elegance, and spiritual depth. She does not just marry people, she prepares them for marriage. Rev Roxy is where purpose meets passion, making every union unforgettable. Wow, we are so grateful to have you with us today.
Thank you. I'm excited.
One thing your bio doesn't say that I just have to bring up is that Roxanne was in Survivor.
Oh my goodness. That was like the beginnings of time. That was the Adam and Eve of my life.
Can you just tell that story? Because I think it's a great one.
Honestly, it was my first year in the Army. I was a chaplain candidate. And I had applied while I was like doing the application for the Army. I had a bet with a cousin's cousin. So I had a cousin's cousin who was obsessed with the TV show Survivor. I didn't watch it, right? I didn't really know what it was about. All I knew is that people were competing for $1 million. And apparently there are a lot of like type A personalities that are on this show. And I was just trying to convince my cousin's cousin to go to church because he would always complain that like he was like sad or whatever. And I'd be like, you need a community. And I guess he thought that was annoying. And he used to say to me, like, you should be on Survivor because you have like that kind of personality. You just like, you're so mission focused, right? And one time he texted me and he goes, oh, they just opened the auditions. He auditioned for this show, like, I want to say 9 years in a row. Like, it was just a part of a tradition for him to audition. One time he got kind of far, but never made it on the show. So he was like, the auditions are open and they're accepting like digital videos. And I had just gotten a new Mac and I didn't know how to make a video on my computer. So, but I figured it out that day. I made like a 15-second video. It wasn't long. It was like 30 seconds maybe, max. I made a 30-second video. It's somewhere on my phone saved. And I submitted it on the website. I remember it was a Dropbox, so it was like very easy to do. And I was like so nervous because I'm not good with technology. And they called me. I went to seminary school because I had a class that day. And then I went to go eat with some friends at a Thai restaurant. And while we were in the restaurant, I looked at my phone and I saw a California number calling me. And then I stepped out to answer it, and it was the people from the show. They were like, oh, we got your video today, and we think you would be a really good candidate for season 25. And I was like, who submits their video get a call the same day? I almost thought it was like a scam. Like maybe I went on a scam website and it wasn't real. But they never asked me for money and they flew me to LA like the next month to audition. And I kept making each round. Um, and then all of a sudden, like I was on season 25 of Survivor. I almost missed my basic training because I was gone right before I had to leave, which you know isn't good. So by the time I got back, I had to actually call the Pentagon to get back into my basic training class.
Oh my
I know,
goodness.
very weird. They were like, where were you? We were trying to call you. And I couldn't tell anybody that I was on the show. So I was like, I wasn't China. I was like somewhere in Asia, essentially. And they were like, why? And I was like, I can't say, like, you know. Anyways, someone,
And they let you in the military.
they let me back into the basic training class. To this day, I remember the exact full bird that did it. Every time I see him, he still calls me by my maiden name. That's how long ago this was. He was like, "You used to be Morris, right?" I was like, "Yes." He he vouched for me. He was like, "Yeah, she did tell me she had this vacation." No, I didn't. I did not. I don't know why he convinced himself, but they let me back in. And honestly, that basic training is where I met my husband too. So this was orchestrated
What?
by God, like the whole thing, the whole thing. It was like so crazy. So I almost didn't even make it. And that's what we laugh about. I almost didn't even make it to that basic training class. It would have been a different class and I would have never met him at all. And that's my survivor. And then I was on like the finale of the show in the fall of that year, right? This all happened in the beginning of the year. Basic training was in the summer. And then the finale for the show came out in the fall. So when I met my husband in basic training, I had to confess to him I was on this show because I mean, I didn't want him to find out later, and then that would have been weird, like you lied to me, kind of, or not told me something. So yeah, that 2012 of mine was a very interesting year that I was on Survivor, and Survivor was such a random part of my life. But I guess it was a nice little foundation to all the other stuff I end up doing. So, yeah.
Wow. And you were on Married at First Sight.
Yes, the very first season of it, which was like the hottest season in my opinion,
Yeah.
the very first wedding ever where someone said, "I do not." That was one of my weddings, yes. So
Wow.
I did not know what I was walking into. To be honest, I never thought that the show would ever air because I thought it was so outlandish. But because it aired during the pandemic, it was the perfect storm and people are obsessed with this show. So it ended up being a blessing. And again, it was one of those moments where I said yes to something, thought it was a scam. Even when I was on set, I thought it was a scam because I was like, this is a ridiculous show. Who wants to watch someone say, I do not, right? Who wants to have a whole wedding to not have a wedding? Um, and so it was a blessing being on that show too. So all these things feel very random, but I'm sure God's doing something in the midst.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just need to emphasize how miraculous that whole thing is that like the military actually allowed her to go to basic training. You do not in the military go overseas and not tell people. Like you can't. Like you have to account for every single place that you ever are and you don't miss dates. Like you get kicked out. And so when Rev Roxy talked about a full bird advocating for her, that means a colonel in the military that's a high-ranking officer. And so clearly, I'm just emphasizing that, yeah, God has been at work in your life because that is like the craziest, most miraculous military story I've ever heard. Like God wanted you to do Survivor, apparently, and God wanted you in the army and to meet your husband.
And to me, it literally God has shown me over and over again. If He wants to, He will.
Yeah.
Like so, when things don't work out for me, I like literally just have to resign to the fact that like I just don't belong there. Like I just shouldn't even be over there. So, because everything that needs to happen in my life does. I mean, recently, even in 2024, I had another military miracle. So like, it really that's just how God is. Like he's pure mystery in my life. I try to explain him obviously because I went to school to try to explain him, but I always tell people there are so much parts of God that cannot be explained and we need to almost resign to that, you know?
Mm.
Part of that is like the respect in the relationship is being like you're strange a little bit and I'm going to just trust that the strangeness going on is the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a quote from you that I saved in my phone. And it is our privilege to seek God with the same diligence God seeks us. Tell us more about that. That really moved me when you said that. Clearly it moved me because I saved it in my phone.
So I probably got that quote from like whenever I've worked on a sermon about the parable, the Jesus parable about the lost coin. In fact, that was the first sermon that I preached, maybe ever, ever in my life. The first sermon I preached was about the parable of the woman searching for the lost coin. And really, there's so much about the woman. First of all, it was the first time God used a woman, honestly, to represent God in a parable. So that was wowing. But diligence in relationship to like femininity or being a wife or being a mom is just a natural feature of women in general, right? But the diligence, the sweeping the floors, the lighting a lamp, searching in the darkness for a coin, just a like coin, um, it takes time, right? It takes time. And so I try to be gentle with myself and I try to help people to be gentle with themselves in terms of like, when they haven't been to church in a long time and they're like embarrassed to share that, they're like, I want to seek God about whatever's going on in their life. But then they're embarrassed because they're like, I haven't gone to church. I haven't said a prayer. I haven't whatever. And I'm like, it's always a good time to just start today with whatever small little ritual or small little thing you can do to show God, like, I'm interested, you know? Um, and nothing's ever small enough, right? It's more about the consistency, the actual desire that all is there. Like, I don't get impressed as a pastor with people who are like, I do a devotional every day. I'm like, great. If that's really what you want to do and that's really what your heart wants you to do, then that's awesome. But if you're doing that because you think God's up there, like keeping score like a third grade teacher, like that's not really quite it for me. Um, Not for me, and I don't even think it is for like the God at least I serve, the one who shows up and does all these things. I'm not worthy of all those amazing miracles that I even describe, but he does them, right? And so, um, yeah, I almost feel like it's like a privilege for sure to even have a career that includes God. Like, most people talk a lot about being too busy, not having the time. And here I am, I'm able to come alongside people, and because I practice it with others, I can do it for myself when I'm in places of darkness, because I always tell my kids it's guaranteed that you're gonna have times of darkness in life. That you will not miss out on. Okay, prepare yourself. You will always get that, right? But your moments of joy with God, like how special is that? Like how special is that? Um, and I'm always learning about God. I'm going to be 90 or 100 on my deathbed and still learning about God and still seeing new miracles come through, that I've never seen, still being in situations where I kind of don't trust, even though I've seen him do great, massive things all the time. But I'm like, how are you going to get us out of this one? I want to see. Like, it's like I'm living in relationship with him, right? Because that's how we talk to our friends. Like, I love you, but I don't know if you can do this one. Let me see, you know? So that's kind of like the kind of relationship I try to model having with God, because I think people are like more so like, God's like this far away thing and really scary and like needs all kinds of perfect behavior in his presence or else he's gonna die. And I always hear people behave that way with God, and I think to myself, like, do you really think God's that weak? Like, do you really think like he's so scared of, like, I don't know, something like if someone says a cuss word, they're like, "Oh my God." I'm like, you really think God's gonna like shrivel up and go away now because you said a curse word? Like, you're fine. Like, I hope I'm not worshiping a God that's that sensitive, because there's a lot of bad stuff going on down here. So,
Mm-hmm.
and if I believe he sees it all, he's a pretty tough God.
Yeah, definitely. He can take it for
Yeah, exactly.
sure.
He can take it.
Yeah, I love it. You have so much confidence, Roxy, in everything you do. I've seen this. So just to fill our listeners in, and maybe we can talk more about this later, but you transitioned from military chaplaincy to Air Force chaplaincy. And so that's how I met Rev Roxy, is both serving at an Air Force base here in Mississippi. She's a reservist, so she comes in for about a month each year. And I was just really riveted with her trust in God. Like, yeah, God's got this. Either this is going to happen or it's not. and just her confidence too. And I have another quote from you that I wrote down.
Love it. I'm like,
So this
yo,
one,
send me those quotes so I can write a book
yeah,
because
yeah, you've got to write your book. So here's this quote that you said to me, and this was over the phone just a few months ago. I think it was like, can't even remember the context. Maybe you remember the context, but I was talking about my past, my divorce, and just some sensitivity and, some shame over that. And I've shared that story on this podcast, and I've shared very openly with listeners that there are up days and down days, and it's for me a real work to be rooted in like my self-worth. And so I think you might have been speaking to that, but you said you need to start looking at yourself as the presence of God. I am God. I am godly. And you were just saying that with conviction. You're like, I am God. I am godly. And I'm like, preach. So tell us more about your thoughts on that.
well, okay, I'm gonna bring up gender, which is like, not really a, I guess, a taboo like statement when you're talking about God, but okay. I see God more in a masculine way. Like I think God understands both masculine and feminine, right? But like when I'm speaking of God in on earth, I say he, right? And there's one thing about men that I've analyzed, particularly going through two branches of the military. Men have this thing that they do where they're confident about something even when they're dead wrong. It annoys me, but also it's what gives them really good leadership,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when I see that, if I'm saying I'm a woman in the military, I'm like, what am I leaving? Because I'm leaving the military with something besides money or a pension. I'm leaving here with something. What do I learn from men, right? Because I get to be around men, I get to learn from men. I'm like, it's how to have that confidence even when you're not sure, because
Yeah.
that's a part of leadership, right? A big part of when you're an officer, you're learning leadership. I just did SOS. Like, leadership is assessing the situation and doing the best that you can with the information that you have,
You
right?
got to tell us what SOS is. Sorry, because people won't know.
Oh, SOS is Squadron Officer School. And when you're usually a captain, the rank of captain, that's when you go to this school so you can prepare yourself to move on to the next level of leadership or the next rank, which is major in '04. So I went to Squadron Officer School, and leadership is kind of like this main thing that they're driving home. And so that idea that you cannot be completely sure of yourself intellectually or logically, but yet you need to demonstrate leadership, you have to have confidence, right? And it looks a certain way. Honestly, it sounds a certain way. Um, and I think sometimes you have to take the time to find within yourself what it looks like so it's organic and genuine to you, right? I never want to come off like I'm like acting or anything like that. But for me, what it means is um I'm stepping out in courage, right? I'm gonna step out in courage. And maybe I'm gonna be wrong. And if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. Life goes on. You know what I mean? Like who's thinking about me and all the wrongs that I've done? I can point out everybody else's wrongs and it's just tit for tat. But life demands so much of us constantly that if every single time life demands something from us, we shrivel up, we're going to be really exhausted and defeated constantly. And I don't know about you, but I don't like that feeling. The feeling that I get from being defeated is exhausting. And being a mom, having a family, running a business, I need energy. I don't need to be exhausted. If I'm exhausted, let's just pack it up and go. Like, let's just do nothing. You know what I mean? But if I'm going to do all of these things and be successful, I need energy. So, even if, I wasn't going to shine bright like a star anymore in my military career, all right, well, this is the end of the road. God brought me through for almost 14 years. Let me cherish my 14 years, may not be 20, may not be 25, but I'm pretty sure I could take my 14 years of military service and go do something good with it. I can still make something out of that, right? I have to. I don't really have a choice anymore. And I think honestly, our 20s was a training ground for probably all of life troubles probably ahead in 30s and in 40s and in, like it doesn't stop, you know? Life keeps lifing until you take the last breath. So as long as you're willing to be alive, you're willing to face life, right? So I don't feel like life really gives us a choice. And I really do feel like not being confident, what's on the other side of the coin is not being confident is energy sucking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
listen, I already sort of got anemia and my energy is naturally low. So I'm like, I just can't do this. So I literally just go, I just gotta be bold. I gotta step out in courage, even though I'm like totally scared and I don't know the future at all. You know, I always make a joke with my friends. I'm like, let me look at my crystal ball when they ask me about something. I gotta consult my crystal ball, and they're like, really? I'm like, no, but you guys are asking me like if I know everything. Like just because I'm the spiritual, my friends are like, what do you think about this? I'm like, I don't know. I just know you gotta be confident through it. Like, what are you gonna do? You know, like even when you tell me about your divorce, I'm like, yeah, we could sit and we can talk about the fact that, it's this many or whatever, but then what's going to happen tomorrow? Let's plan for that. Like, what are we going to do moving forward? You have to keep living. You're alive. Like, you have to keep living. So how are we going to move forward in a positive way to feel good about ourselves? You can't go through the rest of your life. What if you live to be 100? You can't live the rest of your life being sad about something that happened when you were in your 20s or 30s. Like, oh no. That's a
Yeah.
sad life, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that your confidence, like you're saying, you have to like have that within. And I can see a lot of that like intrinsic sense of worth and value. Because I think a lot of times when I work with people, one of their biggest pain points is that they get a sense of worth and value from either the things that they contribute to the world or the things that the world contributes to them. One thing we have to work on is your worth and value as a human being as just being a person in this world is valuable enough. Just being born is valuable enough. And one thing I always say is like the most like useless thing as far as like contributing to society in the world as a baby, but you could never tell a mother that like a baby isn't valuable. Like the baby
Hmm.
is worth everything, even though it's not doing anything to contribute to society, but it has this already built in intrinsic worth and value. And so I'm curious because I see that in you. I'm curious about where you draw from that like internal sense of worth and value.
Um, where do I draw from that? Well, I always start, even with any therapist, like if I go see a therapist, I literally start with what I'm about to tell you every time so that they can get a nice foundation of who I am. My biggest pain in life has always been the same one pain. And it was the fact that my parents separated when I was 7 years old. I will be 90 or 100 or 105. That would be great, God. And someone will ask me, what's the biggest pain of your life? And I'm going to be like, when I was 7 years old, my parents separated, right? It's to the point today I can see my parents fight and I laugh at them actually. At this point, I laugh at that. Like it has grown. It grown in terms of like it's now mature. If my parents fight, I no longer feel the same feelings inside. Like actually, the other like last year when my grandmother died, my mom and my dad were both in Trinidad because my grandmother lives in another country, and they got into a fight in the car. And I started laughing like kind of a crazy person. And my sister's looking at me like, "Why are you laughing right now?" Like they're like arguing. And I was like, I'm laughing because if I was the 7 year girl that still lives somewhere inside of me would be devastated, like devastated to hear my parents argue. But the 40-year-old person that now is here is laughing at them because I'm like, y'all are too grown for this. Like, y'all are too grown for this. You still fighting like cats and dogs, like brother and sister when you were supposed to be husband and wife. Shame on you that you can't mature past this. And so I used to think as a kid that if you grew up without both of your parents, it deteriorated at the value of you, the product, the child. And I still hold fast to the fact that like people should stay together in marriage. I mean, hence my work, Married by Rev Roxy. It was born out of that life pain, right? So when I meet other officiants and they're like, I just love weddings, I'm like, that's not deep enough. Like, that's just not deep enough. Like, I don't care anything about weddings. I mean, I can make them fun, I can make them nice, I can make them pretty, but really, I hope for every couple I counsel or every couple I marry, better for them than my parents ever got. That's how I see it. Like, that's what I'm feeling at every altar I stand at, right? And so my confidence comes out of taking my biggest life pain and flipping it into my value. So I felt devalued because it happened to me. But at some point along the way, probably after I found what I feel like is the love of my life, and I'm like, God gave that to me? Wow. I didn't feel worthy of that. I thought that only kids who came from together families would only find each other and fall in love with each other. Literally, I had made up this whole thing. I had made up this whole thing. And the fact that I could be living in a quality marriage and I didn't come from one, like a family that had that, helped me to have the energy necessarily honestly to have that confidence about everything. The confidence was from God because it spread to everything. It spread to things that had nothing to do with marriage or relationship, right? But it kind of truly came from the fact that I saw God at work. He was real. He is with me. And the truth is, if he's with me, what am I really afraid of, right? And so he was with me when I was 7 and my parents were arguing. Like, he was with me then. That's like crazy to think. It almost makes me cry because those were bad times, right? But he's there in the bad times. He's there in the waiting times where you don't got any information. You don't know left from right. He's there in the good celebratory times. Like, he's just always there, right? He's this good light presence that's always there. Um, and so really the confidence is my ability to lean on him. If I don't have, so when people go, oh, some people used to be a Christian and then they fell out of being a Christian, I'm like, I can't relate. I don't even know what that is. I got too much history with God to be talking about I'm not a Christian. Like, what? Like, not possible. Praise God. I'm so happy for that. I can't relate. I'm sorry. I don't know how that happens. You must not have been real to begin with. Like, that's how I feel because it God is it's a history thing. It's a history thing, right? So when I meet people and they go, I'm not Christian because I feel like I never felt God, I believe that. I believe that. Maybe perhaps you never had those moments to build a history, but mine comes from a personal history. So the confidence only gets better and better and better and better, right? Over time. I'm sure I wasn't maybe exactly this confident when I was 20 something, right? But now I'm 40, so that gives me another 20 something years of history with this God. And it only goes up from there.
And anyone that is just listening and not looking at her when she says she's 40, like everyone that is watching, their jaw is dropping because we look like I thought you were younger than me, in all honesty. So.
No, on Instagram, my favorite thing to do is tell people I'm a senior. They're just like, stop it. Just stop. Because I act like really old, like my personality. Sometimes I'm like, I'm too old to do that. I'm not doing that anymore. People like, oh, they wonder if you can like change your mind about this. I'm like, I'm too old to be changing my mind. I said what I said.
You mentioned that.
I enjoy I love I used to work in a nursing home as a chaplain at one point when it was connected to this hospital I worked at, and they were like my favorite patients because they're just in a phase of life where they're not changing for anybody. Whatever they are at that point is what they are. And I don't know, I thought that that was the coolest part about being a senior. You don't have to change for anybody. I was like, what if I start acting like that earlier in life? Like, I shouldn't have to wait till I'm 70 to be like, no, I said what I said. No, I'm 40 and I said what I said. And if you don't like it, then I don't know what to do. But this is what it's gonna be, you know? So
Do you remember when you first felt the presence of God? I want to go back to what you were sharing about that.
you know what? It's very complicated because I grew up in a Christian home.
Hmm.
And I had to realize when I grew up that not everybody has that story. So when you grow up Christian, you think the whole world is Christian. That's so funny to me to think. And I used to think it was just me that had that experience, but my daughter has this experience too. So we live in Brooklyn, New York, one of the most diverse places in the world, right? And she goes to a Catholic school because that's the closest Christian school to our house, but we're not Catholic. But I go, good enough, because at least you can say Jesus' name at school and no one will look at you weird. That was my basic need, okay? And so they go to church, they learn about communion, they learn about all the Bible stuff. And then one day we were driving in Williamsburg, which is a predominantly Hasidic Jewish neighborhood. And my daughter is like, why is everyone here in this community dressed similar? And like, what is going on? And I was like, oh, they're Jewish. And she goes, like, looking at me like, what does that even mean? And I was having to explain to her that like there are different religions in the world. And she goes like, some people don't believe in God. And I'm like, no, it's not that they don't believe in God. They just believe in God differently, right? So I'm trying to describe this to her. Like, how do you describe to a child different religions who understands that their world only had one religion, but now they're learning there's multiple religions, and then you're kind of teaching them how should they respond to people who have different religions. Like it's all these feelings all in one. And so I often question how my kids experience God because I do feel like I experienced God as a child, but the way in which we experience God at different levels is different, right? So somebody might count me experiencing God in my 20s as the time that I experienced God. But I'm like, no, when I was 7 and my parents were separating and I had nothing in the world to soothe me and make me feel better, my relationship with God really deepened and began then. It may not have been one that I liked, right? Maybe I wanted a God that was more like a Disney miraculous kind of God that like instantly I tell you I want something instantly like genie in a bottle, like fix it now, like fix it now. But I had to learn even at 7 that like that's just not how it all works. Like God has a plan that's thought through all the way to the end. You just don't know about it, right? And so I would bring God into relationship with me all the way back to the 7-year old self who was
Hmm.
experiencing watching this separation happen between parents who were religious. By the way, I think that that's important to note about my parents, why it was painful, because my parents were very much, they are very much Christian, and they met in seminary school. Like my parents were supposed to be like missionaries or pastors together, and they divorced when I was 7. So that had an impact on what I thought about religion. That had an impact what I thought about God. Like it all was a question for me because it's like if this bad thing happened to you guys and you guys should be the ones having the most success, what do I think about the rest of the world? Like, what do I think about religion? Is it even worth it if you could end up broken up anyway? It was all these questions. And so all of those questions are still encounters with God, right? I think when people think about encounter with God, they think of only positive, like only like it needs to look this way for it to be an encounter with God. But I think 9 times out of 10, you're meeting God in a dark place.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's my story about meeting God.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
You mentioned that when you met your husband, you hadn't realized you were worthy of this amazing relationship. That story is pretty unique. Can you tell us a story of how you met your husband and then when you got married? Because it was literally a few weeks after you met, right?
I know. To this day, it's still crazy. So I'm happy that we're coming up on what, 13 years of marriage. It's so much. I have way more confidence talking about it now than when it actually first happened. Because most people were betting on whether it was Christian or the world. Most people were like, "This ain't gonna last." Like, just people in America just can't get married in 3 weeks of knowing each other and last. Okay, not happening. Not only that, but we got married on our lunch break while in basic training. I think that's actually against the rules. And if it's not against the rules, it became against the rules after us, for sure.
I wish you
Um,
could see Sierra's face. Her jaw was dropped for like that
I'm
whole thing.
speechless. I'm
yeah,
speechless.
I
Yes.
married a stranger. There you
No,
go.
you were married at first sight. Like you were
I
the
was.
you
This is what
were
I
the
try to
like
tell the TV show. I
love
don't
is
know why I'm not the
blind.
host. Like, I don't know why I'm not the host. Like, I was. I really was. And the only person that was like truly deeply happy for me was my mom. And you have to understand, my mom's Pentecostal.
Mm.
So if you ever want someone to believe in you in life, find a Pentecostal because they just be believing in like the most outlandish things. Like, that's just my experience with Pentecostal people. If you want somebody to believe in a miracle for you, find a Pentecostal person. My mom was like, this is God. She was like all like welcoming Josh with open arms, like so positive about it. And yeah, when I met Josh, I actually, a couple of months prior to going to the basic training, I had a dream. And the translation of and I took the dream to seminary school because I didn't know what else to do with it. And I had shared it in a small group. And I had asked the people in the small group to try to interpret the dream for me. And it was actually funny because the entire small group I had was all men. I was like the only woman in the group. And I was like, let me put these men to use. I was like, I had a dream, guys. I want each of you to go around and tell me what you think. It was like a spiritual formation class, like an advanced spiritual formation class. And I was like, what do you think the dream means? And the one guy in the group, he was Korean, literally from Korea, and his English wasn't that great, but he felt like he had the interpretation. So I had to kind of like piece together his English to get it. But essentially, he said, "You're going to meet I remember he said, "Are you married?" And I was like, "No, I'm not." And he was like, "You're going to meet the person that you're going to marry." He goes, "And he's not going to appear like somebody that you would marry. But God is in the dream trying to like not humble your spirit, but essentially get you to a place where you're open to because you're gonna meet your husband in a way that is like it's not gonna be like normal or acceptable that that this is your husband." And he's right? Because who meets a stranger and gets married? Like everyone's gonna think you're weird. Like even if they want to hope for the best for you, they're still like, chances are this isn't gonna work out, right? And that was what I got from that dream that I had. So I'm going into this scenario and I meet my husband. And at the time, I had made a bet with my friends that we were all going to get on the dating websites and this is the year we're going to meet somebody. And honestly, and I tell my husband to this day, if I had saw his profile on a dating website, I would have scrolled by. Like he doesn't, there's like nothing that would have stood out. He looks like the all-American normal person. Like, I mean, not saying that everybody I date is some like, I don't know. It just visually wouldn't have been someone I would have been like, hi, how are you? Like I would have just walked by him. But in our in the army, they broke you up into like squadrons and like the smaller groups. He stood right next to me in the line. It was like literally orchestrated that we would be side by side in the same platoon, in the same squadron. And he was from the mountains of Estes Park, Colorado. I would have never met him. I would have never met this person at all. But he had been all the things, you know, when they tell you when you're dating to make a list of like non negotiables, like I'm not negotiating, the person has to be these things. He met all of those things, right? And I didn't have any ridiculous things on my non-negotiables. Like, what's a ridiculous thing? Honestly, I feel like a lot of women out here are very stuck on height. But at the same time, what I am saying is, right, like I wasn't stuck on being like, you need to be 6'5" or I don't want to talk to you. You know what I mean? So try to focus on more of the internal things. I tried to focus more on like things that I thought would be more helpful in actual marital relationship and being a good father and being a good provider and all of those kind of things. And I
Oh.
really thought that I had found it in my husband Josh. And guess what? 14 years later, I can honestly say he was actually who he said he was. Which, as you know, in dating, oftentimes people say they're one thing and then you come to find out, like, no, you got issues and you need help. And, like, no, like, the, you didn't tell me the truth, right? No. And he was someone I could grow with. Josh today is definitely way better than even when I first met him. But when I met him, he was good enough, right? He met my non negotiables. And my biggest thing about being a Christian person was I wanted to find another Christian person, but I was like, I don't want those cheesy. I described to God the Christians I didn't want because I'm like, God, I'm gonna be honest with you, not all your followers, all that. They're not all that. So another thing the dream translated for me was that the person I was going to marry is not from here. Like they weren't from my world. And I think Estes Park, Colorado is extremely different than New York City. And thank God, because I love that about him. I love that he is from a small town and he has like things about that himself that are very valuable to me that I know I don't think I could find in someone that was from my city. So,
I understand like what you were saying with the differences between like some of the meatier things that somebody really needs to consider before marrying someone
yeah.
versus some of the more superficial things like height. Could you, I don't want to skip over that. That is invaluable. Like we need to talk about what are some of those things as married by Rev Roxy, what are some of those things that if you are looking for a partner or considering marrying someone that should be or would be a good idea. I won't put shoulds out, but would be a good idea to look at and say needs to be a non-negotiable, or you need to at least consider these things.
Yeah, I think when you're thinking about your non-negotiables, try super hard. Like I heard a dating coach once say she tells her clients to name six. And she says, if a person doesn't check all six boxes, it's a no.